to safety, prosperity, and peace. Not only have our citizens endured domestic disaster, but they've lived through one international humiliation after another, one after another. This is the legacy of Hillary Clinton: death, destruction, terrorism, and weakness. My message is that things have to change, and they have to change right now. Americanism, not globalism. Americanism, not globalism. Americanism, not globalism will be our credo. I will fight for you, and I will win for you. We will make America strong again. We will make America proud again. We will make America safe again.
In my humble opinion, upon reviewing all the data that I'm going to go over and reading countless articles, clips, and videos over the past week, I think this is the biggest fraud in the history of our constitutional republic is taking place right before our eyes. The corrupt mainstream media and tech oligarchs are colluding in an attempt to assassinate the American public's true legal votes for our President Donald J. Trump through corrupt government officials across countless precincts and corrupt state officials and courts. The evidence will show that President Trump surpassed both FDR and Reagan in the percentage of legal votes, topping 60% when this crime is unveiled. So much of this process has been tainted that it will likely end up before the Supreme Court and allow one electoral vote per state cast. And hopefully Arizona does its part. And eventually the 35 of the 50 states will probably vote.
Biden assault accuser makes offer to Trump, huge announcement. Things continue to go from bad to worse for Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden. Tara Reade alleged earlier this year that Biden sexually assaulted her back in 1993 when she served as a staffer to Biden, who was serving in the U.S. Senate at the time. Reade is refusing to go away and has now offered to speak at the Republican National Convention in order to let her story be known publicly, Fox News reported. Reade said that self-proclaimed feminists have basically ignored her. Many of those so-called feminist writers have just left me standing alone. And it's been isolating and frightening and heartbreaking, she said. We need to figure out a different way to have the conversation. It's not so much about believing someone before it's been investigated. It's more about how it's approached. For instance, in my case, you shouldn't have to lose everything to come forward. You should be able to tell your history of what happened without your life being destroyed and your family's life being destroyed, Reid added. Reid says the offer to speak at the GOP convention is absolutely on the table. I think survivors need a voice and I would be humbled and honored to help raise and lift that voice if that's possible, she declared. Months before the election, Reid is refusing to back down. Reid declared earlier this week that the mainstream media should challenge California Democratic Senator Kamala Harris on the numerous misconduct allegations made against Biden. Harris, who was picked to be Biden's running mate, previously said she believed Reid. Harris previously said, "I believe them and I respect them being able to tell their story and having the courage to do it." Reid said that journalists should be pressing Harris harder about the allegations against Biden. Reid then pointed to Harris' hypocrisy, saying that the California Democrat was tough on allegations against then Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh back in 2018, but lenient with allegations against Biden. The allegations against Biden are not going away. Several months ago, a damning video clip resurfaced last month of Reid's mother calling into Larry King Live on CNN in 1993. Reid's mother can be heard asking King for advice on what to do as her daughter had a problem senator, at that time Biden's position. Reid alleges that Biden was kissing her and asking her if she wanted to go somewhere else, and that after the alleged assault was complete, he said, "Come on man, I heard you liked me." Reid has also said she is willing to testify under oath about her allegations. The law firm representing Reid recently sent a letter to Biden calling on him to open up his University of Delaware archives for a search of all records related to Reid's alleged sexual harassment claim. Democrats do not seem to care at all about the sexual assault allegations that have been levied against Biden. One Democratic state legislator in New Hampshire was pressured to resign after he made a highly inappropriate comment about Reid.
Americans have been betrayed. For decades, our national leaders, both Republican and Democrat, have slid into deceptive politics while slowly eroding the truth and benefit of transparency. Members of Congress, think tanks, presidents, cabinet officials, and the media had all benefited from a sort of gentleman's rules about how Washington, D.C. should operate. Donald Trump obliterated those rules and brought a WWE style to Washington. The establishment didn't like it. Remember how many established Republicans opposed Donald Trump in 2016? The list is so long it has its own Wikipedia page and is broken up by category of title. Donald Trump shook up the Republican Party and many Republicans hated him. Some still do. Most have come around to recognize that the Republican Party has changed. It's now the party of Trump. Those who want the old secret deals and special privileges based on connections have been sidelined. The majority of Republicans have accepted the shift and embraced transparency, some more begrudgingly than others. Democrats are still clinging to the good old boys network of let's tell the American people one thing, but do another. As long as the media is on the side of the establishment, Congress and other powerful leaders can keep the American people in the dark. Donald Trump pulled back the curtain and revealed the corruption for the American people to see. The establishment illegally surveyed candidate Trump's advisors, lied to the court, illegally prosecuted the National Security Advisor, falsely created the Russia hoax, paid foreign intelligence officers for a fake dossier, cooperated with a Russian subsource, lied to the President of the United States, withheld exculpatory evidence, misused the impeachment process, and the list goes on. They've overlooked the fact that Biden did exactly what they unsuccessfully tried to accuse Trump of doing with Ukraine. The Ukraine's equivalent of Attorney General was investigating Burisma, the Ukrainian oil company paying Hunter Biden $80,000 a month in kickbacks. In exchange for the Ukraine firing their prosecutor general, Biden agreed to pay the Ukraine $1 billion in exchange for terminating the man investigating Hunter Biden. One America's Chanel Rion obtained the recordings.
Assuming that there is a new government and a new prosecutor general, I am prepared to do a public signing of the commitment for the $1 billion. Again, I'm not suggesting that that's what you want or don't want. I'm just suggesting that that's what we're prepared to do. And again, it wouldn't be finalized until, you know, the IMF pieces are written.
Extremely strong motivation.
We've all been betrayed. Republicans, Democrats, and independents. Republicans have already been forced to surrender the old way of running D.C. and allow the transparency that Donald Trump brings. Democrats are holding on strong and do not want to let go of getting power through their backdoor deals.
Cash is moving from the Russians to the Clinton Foundation. Cash is moving to Bill Clinton's wallet with a $500,000 payment from Moscow. John Podesta gets a major investment from a Russian in his clean energy company where he sits on the board. Cash was moving all around. Hunter Biden gets lots of cash out of Ukraine. All of these events are interconnected. What we really show, and what the ultimate story of fallout is that we tried to answer the question, why of all the things that Hillary Clinton could have done to attack Donald Trump, why did she pick Russia and Ukraine? Why those two things? And the answer is it was a cover-up. It was to cover up one of the worst foreign policy failures in American history. And the fact that while that policy was failing, all of these Biden, Clinton, Obama acolytes were cashing in, getting money. So you had corruption and bad foreign policy. And the only loser in this story is the American people.
The Uranium One deal, do you cover that as well?
We do. We talk a lot about it.
That deal, I've never understood why that wasn't investigated and prosecuted.
Well, in real time, the
or
FBI,
any of this investigated and prosecuted, for that matter.
Yeah, you've been saying that for months, and you're right. There's a blind eye to all of this. We have one really big revelation on Uranium One, and that is after we broke the story about Doug Campbell, that there was an informant back in 1718, and the Clinton, Obama, Biden machine started firing nuclear missiles at me. One of the storylines that Democrats and the media gave us was, all right, there was a criminal investigation, but we didn't know about it. We had no reason to block the deal. Well, we call bunk on that. We were able to get a December 2017 email that was once classified notifying Congress that in August of 2010, months before they approved Uranium One and a year before they started approving all those billions of nuclear fuel contracts for Vladimir Putin, the Obama top echelons of government, the NRC, the Energy Department, the State Department, were all told the company you're dealing with, Rosatom, they have one entity, RMZ, that's buying Uranium One. The other entity, 10X, is engaged in bribery, in kickbacks, extortion, and money laundering. And despite that warning, despite the fact that they knew that that was a dirty company and that they knew that the company was carrying out a mission by Putin to make America dependent on Ukrainian fuel, they gave away the House anyways. Despite that warning, we debunked the Democratic storyline in this book.
Now, that appears to show Hunter, who has admitted struggling with addiction problems, smoking crack while engaging in a sex act with an unidentified woman, as well as numerous other sexually explicit images. Oh boy, do we have those? I sure hope we don't. Okay, so this is a subpoena to testify before a grand jury. Okay, this is also the Apple MacBook Pro. Okay, so this must be the subpoena that's related to the laptop and the hard drive. Okay, they say photos of the Delaware federal subpoena given to the Post show that both the computer and the hard drive were seized by the FBI in December after the shop's owner says he alerted the feds to their existence. Now, there are also, they say, photos of the hard drive. Oh my goodness. Really? This is what we have? Oh my goodness. Photos of the hard drive, on the hard drive, of Hunter smoking and laying in a bed with a crack pipe. Oh my goodness. Really, dude? Oh, there's the crack pipe. Hunter and a crack pipe has now surfaced. I haven't seen the video of him engaging with a sex act. I don't want to see that. But there you have him sleeping with a crack pipe, smoking a cigarette, shirtless it appears, and hanging out in the hot tub in his home, probably paid for with Ukrainian dirty money. So this is bad news for the Biden campaign. I don't think it's going to change any minds, though, for those who are suffering from Trump derangement syndrome. I think they're pretty entrenched within their decision to vote for Biden. But that's what we have right now. We have a clip here that's related to this. I think we do. Let's roll that.
I've never spoken to my son about going to 6 months.
And so how do you know?
Here's what I know. I know Trump deserves to be investigated. He is violating every basic norm of a president. You should be asking him the question, why is he on the phone with a foreign leader, trying to intimidate a foreign leader, if that's what happened? That appears what happened. You should be looking at Trump. Trump's doing this because he knows I'll beat him like a drum. And he's using the abuse of power and every element of the presidency to try to do something to smear me.
It's laughable, his reaction.
I saw from the mainstream media is the usual cover-up of Biden criminality, which is now at the point of major scandal. I mean, the fact is that there's so much evidence that the Biden family has been taking money illegally for many, many years. I think the Washington press corps knew it and covered it up. And now we have Biden's own text messages to his father, to others, which make it clear that they were stealing money, taking money from countries like Iraq, Ukraine, China, Romania. Oh, don't forget Moscow, the $3.5 million from Moscow that Biden lied about at the debate, which we have proof of. Plus, today, the New York Post completely puts the lie to his claim he didn't know about Burisma, and he didn't know about the shenanigans there and the fact that he was involved in a bribe there, since he said he never met or knew anything about Burisma. And there are text messages that make it clear that in 2015, he had a meeting with the number 2 person of Burisma in Washington, D.C.
Well, let me jump in really quick if you don't mind.
Those texts were supplied by the Post.
Mr. Mayor, let me jump in really quick if you don't mind here. The New York Post, I just want to walk this through as easy as I can for the viewers to understand, because we have 2 elements here. We have emails that we've seen in the New York Post story, and we have pictures of Hunter Biden. And a couple of questions about the pictures in just a minute. But the emails here that we see are alleged from this Ukrainian official on the Energy Board sent to Hunter, thanking him for introducing him to his then vice president, his dad at that time. If these are real and they're true, did Hunter Biden commit anything against the law? Did Joe Biden do anything against the law? Were there crimes committed?
Sure. Here's a couple of them. Number one, if he set up that meeting and he didn't register, he violated the Foreign Agents Registration Act, for which they put Paul Manafort in prison. If they're going to put Paul Manafort in prison, it sounds to me like they should put Hunter Biden in prison. Second, it proves really that Joe Biden was involved in the entire Burisma scheme, in the bribery that he admitted to way back in 2018. He's been lying about this for 6 years. He said, I didn't know anything about Burisma. Here we have a text message, several of them, setting up the meeting, proving the meeting. Oh, and by the way, this isn't alleged. This is Joe Biden's son's hard drive.
Giuliani told Steve Bannon on The War Room that major documents will drop tomorrow on the criminal activity by the Biden family. They state here that the evidence will include non-financial criminal activity. Let's take a look.
Next 24 or 48 hours, are you going to bring forward a potential other information related to non-financial criminal activity?
We're going to do both. There'll be more financial criminal activity, more proof on the stuff that we already have, and some even bigger deals that are eye-popping, and some personal conduct that has to be brought to the attention of the public for you know, to make sure people are safe.
Do you believe that
and that had to be handled. That had to be handled appropriately before they could be discussed.
Do you believe that personal activity is criminal?
No doubters.
Asks Hunter for, and quote, advice on how you could use your influence to benefit the company. The emails and many more involving a Chinese energy company, which we will get into in the interview with Steve Bannon, were recovered from a laptop that was reportedly dropped off at a repair shop in Delaware in 2019 before it was handed over to the FBI. It was said to be a water-damaged MacBook Pro, and the person who dropped it off never paid for the service, and he didn't return to retrieve it or a hard drive on which the contents were stored. This is according to the shop owner, who said he repeatedly tried to contact the client. He says that on the laptop was a sticker from the Beau Biden Foundation, which was named after Hunter's late brother, the former AG of Delaware. On the hard drive are said to be text messages, videos, 25,000 photographs, and 11,500 emails. Some are deeply personal and emotional, and others involve drug use and are quite incriminating for the Biden family.
Once again about Crossfire Hurricane, or Russiagate, Russia narrative, the impeachment charade, however you want to describe it, the phony dossier pushed by the Clinton campaign to smear President Donald Trump and impeach him in an ill-mannered attempt to unseat a duly elected president. Hillary Clinton is the biggest snake in Washington. Hillary Clinton is revealed to be at the core of all of it. A woman so petty, a woman who could not handle defeat, could not accept the results of the 2016 election to such an extent, she threw her entire country under a bus, she sowed chaos, despair, dismay, planted a narrative that convinced huge swaths of Americans who were susceptible to Trump derangement syndrome to believe that the President of the United States was a Manchurian candidate. It was all orchestrated, and now we have declassified CIA documents related to John Brennan, of course we all know John Brennan, which were declassified in October 2020 by DNI Radcliffe, essentially saying the entire thing was drummed up by Hillary Clinton to apparently, not surprisingly, push attention away from Hillary's email scandal. Yep, that's how Washington works, folks. And Washington spied on the man's campaign over misinformation from a political candidate who just could not accept the reality of losing the election. She pretended on that fateful day, on November 3rd, 2016, that she was conceding, and she called President Donald Trump and congratulated him for winning. All the meanwhile prepared a sinister plot to go after him because she just couldn't accept it.
Uncover voter fraud. Yet, reports do get through, don't they? And if you look closely, and if you have been looking closely, you can see them almost every day.
You have been charging for months that mail-in balloting is going to be a disaster. You say it's rigged, that it's going to lead to fraud.
This is going to be a fraud like you've never seen.
And it goes on to the end of the theme from the Lone Ranger, or whatever that is, the William Tell Overture. It goes on and on and on. And now that the election is happening, yes, we are finding real results, real flawed results from this election. Michigan officials earlier today.
In Antrim County, ballots were counted for Democrats that were meant for Republicans, causing a 6,000 vote swing against our candidates. The county clerk came forward and said tabulating software glitched and caused a miscalculation of the votes. Since then, we have now discovered that 47 counties use this same software in the same capacity.
Isn't that something? That's a lot of votes. Now, Pennsylvania, they really want to just hurry up and call it. You do know they changed all the rules in the run-up to the election. And look at how close it is right now. Let's put that up on the big screen. Let's see. We've got a 15,000 vote difference, and the mainstream media, they seem to be on the verge of calling this thing, even while they're still counting votes, and even
are fired after they blow the whistle on suspicious activity in Fulton County. One had 20 years on the job and another 9 years. NTD's Melina Weiskup has the story.
Just a few weeks after testifying before the Georgia State Senate, 3 poll workers with decades of experience were terminated with no explanation. Only a letter saying that the supervisor has decided not to reappoint them.
Fraud, deceit, abuse of the system. And that's all I was trying to point out to those who are in charge. And I've been trying to do this more than this election.
Susie Voiles has been a poll manager in Fulton County for 20 years, and this year she spoke out about a number of election irregularities, like when she saw stacks of flat, unfolded absentee ballots marked the same way as if they were copied from one another, and 98% for Biden.
Our country was founded on the idea of liberty and personal responsibility. I was thinking back to what the soldiers at Valley Forge went through when they were in the snow. They had dysentery, their feet were wrapped in just claws because their shoes are totally worn out. They've been away from their family for over 2 years, and yet they persisted on what they believed was the dream of liberty for all of us to go on. And so they were not intimidated by all the obstacles that faced them. I cannot be intimidated, and I'm also trying to keep it so that we have a country that those who cannot live in their homelands because things are so oppressive still have a place to come to for liberty.
And another woman who was terminated, Bridget Thorne, testified about a lack of security in the Fulton County warehouse. Thorne said she witnessed a situation where just anyone could print sample ballots, which looked identical to regular ballots. And Thorne told NTD in a previous interview that it's odd how elections officials seemed more eager to hire inexperienced poll workers over experienced ones.
And yet for me to get in that position, I had to send multiple emails. Who do I go to? Who do I hire? Who's hiring? This person isn't responding. The people who are qualified aren't getting asked to help.
Voyles shared her sentiments and said she saw major gaps in training which led to the chaotic scenes many have witnessed in Fulton County. Like this poll watcher who told us he was given a suitcase of ballots to take within minutes of being there to observe.
So he offers me a suitcase of ballots, and there's how little security there is there. It was freaking me out.
When they are hiring 17-year-olds who have never even worked a poll to manage a poll, and they're all partisan, this sounds like it's serving a dual purpose.
That's why Voyles says she's determined to continue to expose any potential illegal votes or irregularities. She's in good spirits because she says she's doing what's right. And she encourages others in all other states under investigation to, in her words, press on and be honest.
Here he is at a hearing that has nothing to do with Russian disinformation, talking about that like this is a hearing on Russian disinformation, adding that's why he decided to call up Peters.
I can't sit by here and listen to this and say that this is not disinformation, this hearing today. This is getting information we have to take a look at to restore confidence in our election integrity. We're not going to be able to just move on without bringing up these irregularities, examining them, and providing an explanation, and see where there really are problems so we can correct it moving forward. Senator Paul.
Peters responded that Johnson was making false allegations.
This is terrible what you're doing to this committee and all the great work that you talked about.
It is what you have done to this committee.
It is not
falsely
the case.
accusing the chairman of spreading disinformation. Nothing could have been further from the truth, and you're spouting it again, which is why I had to respond. Senator Paul.
Mr. Chairman.
Judge Storm.
This is outrageous.
Judge Storm.
Senator Peters didn't immediately respond to a request for comment. Johnson said they made progress in the hearing. He added witnesses provided good information to the committee so they can solve these problems and restore confidence in America's election system. Juliet Son, NTD News.
He actually turned them over because the FBI had had them for 6 months and done nothing with them. And then he was quite upset with the coverage, the kind of coverage you're describing tonight, about how this morning rather, about how unfair it was. He happens to be a fan of mine, unlike Biden's attorney, and thought I was being treated very unfairly. Yeah, so he called my lawyer, and he said, I have a group of emails that are shocking to me and display right on the face of it a number of federal crimes. And I'm even a lawyer. Yeah. So my lawyer went down there. He vetted him for 2 weeks, actually. And I emphasized to you how this is authenticated. First of all, I did and my lawyer did. Okay, you don't have to accept that. I gave them to the New York Post, and they held them for a week and authenticated them. I mean, I don't think the New York Post would publish them without being absolutely certain they're authentic. Finally, they don't even dispute that they're authentic, and I'll give you the best one of all. The big mouth lawyer made a very big mistake. Before this was even out, when it was just they were called about it, first thing he does is call that merchant, and he says, can I have my client's hard drive back? So he's basically admitting for his client, as his client's agent, that's Hunter Biden's hard drive. And if you would like to send a representative of your show to my office, I have you take a look at it. You tell me if it isn't authentic. It's authentic as hell. Some of those pictures on it can only have come from him. And I'll tell you why I know it for sure. I have about 10 pieces of confidential information nobody knows, except me and Hunter Biden. Kept it that way. You know, I investigated cases of 50 years. Every one of those hits the mark.
Rudy,
Every one. In other words, I have an anonymous source. I'll give you an example. I have an anonymous source that reports on a meeting at the State Department, which would violate the Foreign Agents Registration Act. And Hunter Biden was taken in the back door and kept off the books. The gentleman who was involved in it and who told me about it had the date. I've had that for a year and a half. That very date shows up in his emails. There are 5 emails setting up that appointment, that date, that exact time. I've got 5 of those if anybody cares to examine it. They're not even disputing it. This is Hunter Biden's emails, texts, and really, the photographs will shock the hell out of you.
So, Rudy, for people
of China is, yes, these are other bad regimes, but it is the most malignant government on earth. And that's saying something given the other hostile regimes like Russia, Iran. But that did not stop Zero Experience Hunter Biden. He was raking in millions in cash and equity from well-connected, high-ranking Chinese nationals and begging for millions more from a Chinese energy company. And breaking tonight, according to text messages obtained by Fox News, we can report that Hunter's now ex-business associates were actively looking for ways to, quote, get Joe, remember the big guy, involved in their China venture. And one of Hunter's former partners even texted, quote, let's get the company set up and then tell H and family and the high stakes and get Joe involved. Get Joe involved. Let me repeat. Why on earth would Hunter's business associates want to get Joe Biden involved with a private equity deal in a foreign country like China, which is a hostile regime towards us? Were they selling the access? Again, special treatment. Are they compromised? In other words, the former vice president and his son, what does China have on them? What potential compromise can exist? And what does this mean for the country? But remember, during a train wreck interview on GMA, Zero Experience Hunter claimed he had not received 1 cent from his China deals. Now, why would he have said that? The Johnson-Grassley report contradicts that and detailed the millions in wire transfers, from China. And the report also found that Hunter's family went on a $100,000 shopping spree, compliments of a Chinese national. Remember, Tony Bobolinsky was on with Tucker, Hunter's former business partner, claiming that Hunter received direct payments from China. Even Hunter's own attorney was forced to issue a clarification after the disastrous GMA interview, admitting his client received equity. Well, it tends to be in the millions and millions of dollars, we now know. And breaking tonight, a report from the Daily Caller shows that Hunter Biden was due to receive massive payouts from a Chinese equity venture starting in 2019 and continuing for, quote, a couple of years. In other words, to put it simply, as we speak, Hunter or someone else in the Biden family might well be receiving cash now from China. Joe Biden wants to run this country. His son might well be getting cash payments from what is our #1 adversary, the most malignant country in the world. Joe Biden wants you to believe this is nothing more than a big right-wing smear campaign. Take a look.
We have great confidence in our son. I am not concerned about any accusations been made against him. It's used to get to me. I think it's kind of foul play, but look, it is what it is, and he's a grown man. He is the smartest man I know. I mean, for the pure intellectual capacity, and as long as he's good, we're good.
As long as he's good, we're good. Well, it's not good to me. Remember, Hunter Biden currently under a federal criminal probe as we speak involving international money laundering, tax evasion. This is not going away, and it's not a right-wing smear. This is an independent federal probe that has nothing to do with President Trump or his administration. And now Senator Rand Paul, he is rightly calling on the feds to treat Hunter just like they would treat anyone else connected to Trump or his campaign. Take a look.
If he's confident, he should leave in place the U.S. attorney who's investigating Hunter Biden. There is a U.S. attorney in Delaware doing this. Traditionally, when a new president comes in, they fire all the U.S. attorneys. If he wants to show that this is going to be a upright, upstanding Biden administration and that they're going to actually let the cards lie where the cards lie on Hunter Biden, he needs to leave that U.S. attorney in place. So that's something very carefully to watch. If the U.S. attorney is fired in the first weeks of the administration, and if the investigation goes to a Biden appointee, you can tell the fix is in and there's not going to be justice.
And of course, Biden himself bragging on tape about, well, you got 6 hours, fire the prosecutor or you're not getting $1 billion taxpayer dollars. That would be a quid and a pro and a quo by Joe. So that prosecutor who was investigating Hunter and Burisma, he got fired. 6 hours later, son of a bee, they did it. So now the call for this investigation into the corrupt Biden Business Bureau, well, it's way past time for real accountability. It is time for real answers about just how much Joe Biden was willing to sell access to the vice presidency, and his son and his family cashed in big time. Here with more, Republican Congressman Jim Jordan and Congressman Ken Buck. Ken, let's talk about what you're fighting for and asking for here.
Absolutely, Sean. What I'm asking for is the Attorney General of the United States to appoint a special counsel to look into the very facts that you just pointed out. There is a serious pattern of corruption that Hunter Biden has engaged in with Joe Biden's knowledge. It was just 2 days after a Burisma board member met with Joe Biden that Hunter Biden goes on the board of Burisma and gets $83,000 a month in payments. It's just 12 days after Hunter Biden is on a plane with his dad, Air Force Two, going to China, that all of a sudden this investment company is created. There is this pattern of behavior. If the Vice President of the United States is willing to do it, there's no reason to believe that the President of the United States won't do the same thing.
All right, Jim Jordan, you know, I'm going to tell you how people feel, and when I talk to people, what they're telling me, is there anything we reported on the Trump, Russia, 2016 collusion hoax that was wrong? Anything about the dirty dossier that we reported that was wrong? Anything about premeditated fraud on the FISA court that was wrong? Any of that wrong?
No, only thing we were wrong about, Sean, it was worse than we thought. And the way you framed it up is exactly why Ken's call for a special counsel is needed. For 4 years, the Democrats said President Trump colluded with Russia. We know that wasn't true. They went after his family, deposed Don Jr. for over 30 hours. Turns out that whole time, it was actually the Biden family who was enriching themselves with foreign deals. And oh, what did we learn today? Today we learned the very people, Sean, the very people, though, who accused him of that over 4 years, we learned today we're cozying up with the Chinese spy, for goodness sake. So, of course, we need what Ken called for to get to the bottom of this.
All right, the president now is reacting to a flood of information coming out about how the deep state targeted and, in fact, spied on his campaign. On Twitter earlier today, he wrote, "Look how things have turned around on the criminal deep state. They go after phony collusion with Russia and a made-up scam and end up getting caught in a major spy scandal, the likes of which this country may have never seen before. What goes around comes around." We've been saying that. Didn't we call this the year of the boomerang? It's exactly what this is. You have a criminal deep state, and it's all coming out at breakneck speed. Now, it's literally hour by hour, the things that we're learning. It's new and it's damning. The details are unbelievable. The president slamming the entire scandal and giving it a new nickname. This is the tip of the iceberg. Take a look.
We now call it Spygate. You're calling it Spygate. A lot of bad things have happened. I want them all to get together. They'll sit in a room. Hopefully, they'll be able to work it out among themselves.
Now, because new information is coming out at a rapid-fire pace, deep state actors like the arrogant, sanctimonious James Comey, they are racing to try and cover their tracks. Now, Comey fired off a pair of tweets this morning. Facts matter. The FBI's use of confidential human sources, the actual term, we call them spies, is tightly regulated and essential to protecting the country. Attacks on the FBI and lying about its work will do lasting damage to the country. How will Republicans explain this to their grandchildren? Well, here's a better idea, Jim. How will you explain what you did to your grandchildren? And you have to love how Comey is using FBI official jargon, confidential human sources, to try and spin this. Did you have a spy in the Clinton campaign? Did you have a spy in that campaign? He continues. Dangerous time when our country is led by those who will lie about anything, backed by those who will believe anything based on information from media sources that will say anything. Americans must break out of that bubble and seek truth. All right, speaking of lying, that's exactly what Comey did under oath in front of Congress when he falsely claimed that he didn't decide to exonerate Hillary Clinton before interviewing her and 17 other key witnesses. They were writing it months before. And you know why? Because Comey's corrupt. Thank God the president fired him. And he can't keep his big mouth shut. We advised him he has the right to remain silent. And the president is right to fire back at the disgraced former FBI director. Let's take a look at what he said.
I think James Comey's got a lot of problems. If you look at what he did, if you look at all of the lies, the tremendous lies, if you look at all that's going on, I think James Comey's got a lot of problems. Now, at some point, they have an IG report, and then let's see what James Comey has to say. But I assume he's covered in the IG report. But if you look at what he said, all of the lies, all of the fiction, I think he's got a lot of problems. I did a great service to this country by firing James Comey. And, excuse me, a lot of people have said it. And you go into the FBI, and a lot of those great people working in the FBI, they will tell you, I did a great service to our country.
My FBI friends tell me that every day, and they are helping to expose the corruption in their agency. They want the truth out because it's not rank and file. So the soon-to-be-released DOJ IG report is supposed to hammer Comey's corrupt handling of the Clinton email investigation. We know it was rigged. We know Clinton committed felonies and crimes and obstructed justice. And Comey and his buddies and Strzok to put the fix in to save Hillary's campaign. Then they quickly started spying on the Trump campaign. Where's the warrant? Where's the justification? Now, Comey's deep state buddy, former Obama Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, he is now in a panic, rushing to try and save himself. Now, he's running from liberal media outlet to liberal media outlet, promoting his new book, just like James Comey did, and trying to spin what is a false narrative. Take a look at what he said with the ladies on The View.
I ask you, was the FBI spying on Trump's campaign?
No, they were not. They were spying on a term I don't particularly like, but on what the Russians were doing, trying to understand, were the Russians infiltrating, trying to gain access, trying to gain leverage and influence.
So why doesn't he like
what they do?
So why doesn't he like that? He should be happy that.
Well, he should be.
Really? The president should be happy? The Obama administration and people in the FBI were spying on his campaign without a warrant that we know of? And then the FISA warrant, they lied to 4 judges? Is that not the deep state trying to destroy his candidacy, now presidency? And at this point, Clapper is he's straight up delusional. The president, good for him. He's not letting these lies slide either. He's taking them head on. Tonight, damning new details continue to emerge surrounding Joe Biden's family corruption scandals. Documents, texts, emails, eyewitness accounts are now painting what is a very corrupt and a very ugly picture. And, of course, it is well documented the fact that Biden's son, zero experience Hunter, his brother Jim, received millions and millions of dollars from sketchy foreign nationals, cashing in on then Vice President Biden, and that would be Ukrainian oligarchs, Russian oligarchs, Kazakh oligarchs, Chinese nationals, Bank of China, you name it, they were making money, and all to buy influence. And now, thanks to what are troves of new evidence, it is becoming increasingly clear Joe Biden himself played a critical role in the sketchy payouts, offering special access in exchange for sweetheart business deals, millions for his family. And according to a former Biden business partner, Tony Bobolinsky, Joe Biden not only knew about the pay-for-play schemes, but was an integral part of the process. And it's important to point out that so far, no one has directly refuted Mr. Bobolinsky's claims, not Joe Biden, not Hunter Biden, not Jim Biden. In fact, over at FoxNews.com, breaking just moments ago, this is what happened when Jim Biden was asked if he had any response to all the corruption allegations leveled against him and his family. Let's take a look.
Mr. Biden, hi, do you care to answer some questions? No. Just wondering, why did you involve Joe Biden in your China deal? Why did you and Hunter Biden want Joe Biden to meet with Tony B? What are you talking about? Are you Mr. Jim Biden? I wanted to ask you about the China deal.
Would you please stop bothering me?
You don't want to comment, sir?
I don't want to comment about anything to you.
The money, the wire transfers, it's all chronicled now. A serious scandal, national security, diplomatic implications on a massive scale. You wouldn't know it, though, if you watch fake news CNN or MSDNC or you got your news from anyone in the media mob. They didn't cover Tucker's hour-long interview with Mr. Bobulinski. They're not investigating his claims. They're not verifying the evidence. They are completely and totally ignoring all of it, which is in and of itself a scandal. By the way, as they ignored the Johnson and the Grassley report, you know, about the oligarchs, about the wire transfers, Russia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, China. It's like an outright censorship of all of this by big tech companies, Twitter, Facebook, the media mob. And tonight it is more obvious than ever that very powerful forces, the media mob, 99%. Big tech companies, almost all of them. The Democratic Socialist Party, the establishment never Trumpers, weak establishment Republicans, and the deep state now are all aligned against this president and his reelection. Now, the only thing that can stop that from happening is you, the American people. And
Okay, the Senate Homeland Security Committee moving forward now with its investigation of Joe Biden's son, Hunter, despite objections from Democrats. In a party line vote, the committee authorizing a subpoena for documents related to Hunter Biden's consulting work in Ukraine. Let's bring in Ken Starr now, former independent counsel and a Fox News contributor. Ken, good morning to you. Great to have you here this morning. So where ultimately do you believe Republicans will get with this?
Well, we don't know, but what we do know is that Chairman Ron Johnson is really, America is open for business again, other than New York. And he's now open for business again. This is actually a continuation of a long-running investigation. So we've been on hold. And all this flurry represents is, whoops, Ukraine is back. But Ukraine never really went away. And so I view this as just accountability. And as Senator Johnson has said on Fox News, let's just get these facts. And if there's no there, but why all the protesting? Why don't we just get these documents in good order and analyze them and so forth? Final point on this. What we do know is that this firm, Blue Star, did make arrangements for Burisma, which is a corrupt company in Ukraine, to have meetings with the Justice Department and the State Department in Washington, D.C. during an election year. Let's just find out the fact. Maybe they were innocent, maybe they weren't.
This is the point that Senator Ron Johnson makes. He says he could have actually done this all quickly, had the documents turned over, and moved on. But he claims that Democrats are throwing a hissy fit, and their objections, quite frankly, he says, have left him suspicious. He says now it's about getting to the truth. Here's Senator Ron Johnson.
Because American people need to know the truth. We certainly have uncovered corruption within the Obama administration. Well, we'll get the documents and we'll see what is in the documents. Yeah, I'm not the one that made a big deal of this. I would have quietly issued a subpoena to Andrei Teleshenko, got the documents, and moved on. Same thing here. But the Democrats are objecting, and I think maybe they're protesting too much.
So is he hitting on something there, Ken? I mean, he makes the case that it appears we've struck a nerve.
It would appear that way. You say Hunter Biden and the Democratic side of the aisle goes crazy. But even Hunter Biden, serving on the Burisma board, later said that was an exercise in poor judgment on his part. Well, why is that? Because Burisma was corrupt. And now we're talking about Burisma, not in the Ukraine. We're talking about Burisma's activities in Washington, D.C. during an election year. This is accountability. This is fact-finding. That's what the Senate should do. And I applaud Senator Johnson just saying, let's get the facts. This is a continuation of what began literally months ago. So it's a restart.
To that point, when you see Democrats making their objections to this, they make the case that this threatens the integrity of the 2020 elections and undermines national security. To that, you say what, Ken?
That it's nonsense. How can it affect anything other than we will know what happened in 2016? Why did Hunter Biden go on that board? It's a very important question. Highly important because he was, of course, acting without all that many credentials. We've talked about that before. And now what we're talking about specifically, so let's just be very direct, Burisma in Washington and trying to use its influence in Washington, D.C. We deserve to know that.
Joined now by former New York City Police Commissioner Bernie Kerik, also a Newsmax contributor. Bernie, it's great to see you as always. Folks, if you want to go and follow Commissioner Kerik on Twitter, you can't. His account has been suspended. Was the lockout because of your posts about this scandal, Bernie?
Yeah, I think it's back up now, but it was initially as a result of some of the things I posted. The bottom line is I've reviewed the drive on several days with Mayor Giuliani, and it's kind of stunning. There's about 28,000 images, just under 28,000. There's about 60,000 text messages and emails, and I have to admit, we're not through it all. We're probably through less than half of it. In depth. But there's a bunch of stuff that's already come out of this. The fact that Joe Biden says that he never had a conversation with his son about his business dealings, that's a lie. There's proof in the emails that that's not true. There's deals that they discuss that's discussed in the emails. Where Biden gets 10% of one thing. In another email, he's talking about 50% that he had to give his father. There's just, it's overwhelming. And here's the one thing that really bugs me, Chris. They put Rod Blagojevich in prison for 14 years for talking politics on a phone when he had no personal, professional, or political gain. None. Zero. This family has taken in millions of dollars off of Joe Biden's position, and there doesn't seem to be a real investigation when, in fact, we know that the FBI picked up that computer and a hard drive on December 9th of 2019. How these guys are not in handcuffs, how there's not an active, ongoing investigation, I don't know. But I think it's something the president has to look at and hold people accountable that failed in their duties.
Yeah, I want to get to the FBI and their possession of this information in a minute. But let me ask you. You mentioned images. Are there any images on this laptop, on this hard drive, that are illegal?
I don't want to get into that right now. This is, there's two areas of focus, I think, for us. One is the Ukrainian, China, and other deals that were put together by Hunter that led to his father, or was, dealt with his father and his uncle James. There's a bunch of him in there as well. And there's a bunch of images that I think state authorities have to look at, but I can't get into that right now.
I understand. Let me talk about the FBI. It is, as you point out, the FBI has been in possession of this laptop or the hard drive since 2019. Question: Christopher Wray, is he withholding information so as to not influence an election against Democrats?
Well, look, here's what we know. We know there was a grand jury subpoena issued on December 9th for the laptop and the drive. We know they picked it up. There's a receipt given to the Mac shop owner for the MacBook Pro and drive. They took possession of it. Where it went from that point on, we don't know.
Strikes the reference to Joe Biden as the center of the proposed investigation and replaces it with the true topic of the investigation, Burisma and Hunter Biden. An essential element of the Democrats' case on abuse of power is that the Bidens did nothing wrong. It can only be an abuse of power and not a correct use of power if the president was pursuing something under which there was no reasonable basis to ask a question about Hunter Biden and Burisma. Hunter Biden and Burisma, well, that's an interesting story. And I think just about every American knows there's something up with that. $86,000 a month, no experience, working for some foreign government while your dad's the vice president of the United States. Is there anyone who believes this is okay? I know we got a few of my Democrat colleagues maybe run for president or might run for president one day. Would you let your vice president have their son or daughter or family member out moonlighting for some foreign company? Maybe I'll use language familiar to the former vice president. Come on, man. This looks dirty as it is. Hunter Biden was making more than 5 times more than a board member for ExxonMobil. I've heard of that company. And so I went to read up on Hunter Biden, learn a little more about him. I found this very extensive profile in the New Yorker. And here's what it says. Hunter said that at that point, he had not slept for several days. Driving east on Interstate 10 just beyond Palm Springs, he lost control of his car, which jumped the median and skidded to a stop on the shoulder of the westbound side. He called Hertz, which came to collect the damaged car and gave him a second rental. The Hertz rental officer told me he found a crack pipe in the car and on one of the consoles a line of white powder residue. Beau Biden's Attorney General badge was on the dashboard. Hertz called the Prescott Police Department and officers filed a narcotics offense report listing items seized in the car, including a plastic bag containing white powdery substance, a Secret Service business card, credit cards, and Hunter Biden's driver's license.
Laundering laws, and among the things they're looking at is whether or not income was reported or underreported correctly over the last over a number of years. Wolf.
I understand you're also learning that the federal investigators are specifically interested, Evan, in a gift of a diamond that was given supposedly to Hunter Biden in China. Tell us about that.
That's right, Wolf. There is a very curious episode that happened in 2017. Hunter Biden described some of this in a New Yorker profile that was published last year. He said that at the end of a meeting with this businessman, Ye Jianming, who he was trying to get into business with, at the end of that meeting, he goes up to his hotel room and he receives a 2.8 carat diamond. Now, it's not clear what happened to the diamond. According to the account that Hunter Biden provided to the New Yorker, he says he gave it to some associates and he doesn't know what happened to it. We know that investigators have been looking specifically into the treatment of that for tax purposes. Obviously, that implies a gift tax, which we don't know exactly what happened to the way how Hunter Biden accounted for that on his taxes, but we know that this is one of the curious issues that the investigation has been looking at. Now, again, Hunter Biden says that he is going to cooperate with this investigation. He says that he had the advice of tax professionals in all of his affairs, and so we'll see what the new Biden administration, which promises to leave the Justice Department alone, to make sure that the Justice Department does its investigations without interference, how they handle this very, very thorny issue now.
Because there's so much to this hard drive, it's going to be impossible for me to analyze it professionally before the election. And you're already voting, and you need to know this, and a deliberate conspiracy is there to stop you from knowing it. This should outrage you. I don't care if you're a Republican, a Democrat, an independent, a liberal, a conservative. You got to vote against this. You got to vote against. You got to register your vote. No censorship in the United States. I don't care how powerful you are. I don't care how much money you have. You're not going to stop me from getting the information I need to know as a citizen. And if you're going to pay a big penalty. This is a year you vote against Democrats. You vote Republican, right across the line. I'm going to tell you why. Because you will empower the good Democrats if you do that. You'll empower them to throw out the people who have corrupted the party. And this is maybe a story for another day, but I believe this corruption of the Democratic Party all began with Bill Clinton. It was a different party before that. I was here in the 1980s. By here, I mean Washington, D.C. I worked in the Reagan administration. I worked a lot with Democrats. I was mayor of a city that was a Democrat. I had 45 Democrats and 6 Republicans in the city council. I was able to work with the Democrats. Not all, most. Some were friends. Some were good friends. Some are good friends today. It hasn't been affected by this Trump derangement insanity. Some friends I've lost because of the Trump derangement syndrome. Some friends have lost their jobs because of it. And some friends have been threatened with the loss of their jobs because of it. This isn't right. This sickness has to end. The only way it ends is you elect Trump. Even if you're a Democrat, the Democrats will go back. They'll get rid of the crooks that kind of come out of Biden and Clinton and the good people of the Democratic Party, of which 98% will be able to take it over. And it can be a good alternative to Republican conservatism and traditional Democrat liberalism in the interpretation of our Constitution and our laws. That's a healthy country. Right now, we are unhealthy. So let's go over the transactions that have been described so far to show you the incredible breadth of criminality involved here. The first one is the one that probably you know the most about. That's Ukraine. And Ukraine, the hard drive is filled with emails and text messages that explain Ukraine. It's actually the thing that led the gentleman who was repairing it to turn it into the FBI, because he heard the things being said by the Bidens on television and the Democrats on television during the impeachment proceedings, and he found it to be lies. Particularly Joe Biden saying, I knew nothing about the company that paid all that money to my son. I knew nothing about my son's foreign dealings. So in the hard drive, inside it, if you look at the text messages and the emails, you find Joe Biden did know about Burisma. The one that's been put out is the one in which there are a series of text messages with a gentleman named Poharsky, who was the number 2 person at Burisma and the person who ran Burisma, in which over a period of time, Hunter Biden set up a meeting with the vice president then, and then Mr. Poharsky writes an email back thanking Hunter Biden for it, having such a good meeting with the vice president. And prior to that, actually, Mr. Poharsky had asked Hunter Biden to use his influence to help the company. And this was his using his influence to help the company because Hunter Biden had no influence. The influence that he had sold was his father. So that's a very big lie that Joe Biden had been telling for years that was exploded by that email trail. It also makes clear in ways that when we have time, we can go into great detail on if you want. But if you go back and look at my podcast, you can see a lot of the detail. But here's what happened in Ukraine in 2 minutes. Mykola Zlochevsky, who was one of the biggest crooks in Ukraine and owned a company named Burisma, which had been put together by leases that he gave to himself when he was a government minister. He was, when the government changed, he was caught having stolen about $5 billion. He ran away. So he was in jeopardy of losing his business and losing his $5 billion because they were chasing it all over the world. President Obama appointed Joe Biden point man to help Ukraine out of its problems. Problem number 1, they were bankrupt. Problem number 2, they're being attacked by Russia. Well, every time Joe Biden was named point man, he failed. So he failed to help on either one of those two. Didn't reduce the corruption, made it worse. Didn't help with Russia because they wouldn't give them arms. They wanted to fight Russia with slingshots, I guess. It was President Trump who gave them guns. But worse than that, Zlochevsky, facing the elimination of his business and knowing that Poroshenko, the president of Ukraine, was corrupt, but he couldn't reach him because they were enemies, decided a more powerful man than Poroshenko in Ukraine was Joe Biden, because he was controlling the billions of dollars that would keep Ukraine going or not. And he knew what the press and the high-tech media keeps from you. He knew that Joe Biden was corrupt, that he had done this before. So he, through a particular person who I won't name yet because he may very well be a witness, through a particular person, he got to Joe and he made a deal. Here's the deal. As Joe Biden would say, here's the deal. Come on, man, here's the deal. The deal is that Joe Biden was going to use his influence to protect the company if the government tried to seize it, because he was close to Poroshenko and because he had a holdover. He had that money, and they were friends. And in exchange for that, Zlochevsky, who was a serial briber, bribed everyone, hired his son and his son's partner and paid the money to a firm that included the stepson of the Secretary of State. So he basically was able to pay the son of the vice president, who was the point man for Ukraine. He was able to pay the stepson of the Secretary of State, and then finally Devon Archer was the guy who was going to manipulate around, since convicted as a federal felon in a separate matter. In fact, a lot of the people around the Bidens have been convicted and sent to jail or on their way to jail. And the money was going to Hunter, but Hunter really did very little work, if any. I don't believe he ever went to Ukraine, so we could describe it pretty much as a no-show job. Or after a while, the couple of times he showed up in Monaco, he was so unfortunately drunk and high that he was an embarrassment to them. So this was pass-through money to Joe Biden. Joe was using his son as a bagman. Typical Democrat Tammany Hall type corruption. Somebody else collects the money for the principal, holds it, and then passes along some or all of it. This is Chinese style. Read Schweiker's book. He'll explain to you that the Chinese do corruption this way. They don't pay the money to the principal. They pay it to the son, the daughter, the brother, the close friend, and then they do two things. And let me skip ahead. There is an email that describes this scheme in the greatest of detail, and the email says that, this is Hunter Biden complaining to his half-sister that for 30 years I have had to pay for all of the expenses of the family, and Pop required me to give half of the money to him. There you go. Very simple. You got it all. You got a nice, tight bribery case. Not atypical of the way bribery cases work. Probably obvious from all of the circumstantial evidence surrounding it, but we don't need to rely on that. We have Hunter Biden, text message complaining about how he's been misused, which he has been actually. For 30 years, he's been collecting money. That's really the old man's money. From that, he takes care of lots of expenses, like his stepsister or half-sister's education, many things. It explains how the Bidens, who for years, question was, how can a senator have these multi-million-dollar homes? Well, because of the bribe money that's indirectly coming to him. That's how. The millions in bribe money. Hunter would get it, take care of the expenses, and then ultimately have to kick back half to Joe. That's how Ukraine was handled. So that's the Ukraine. This is the time to take a short break.
How bad is it? Your back, knee, or neck pain? My knee pain was awful. I probably tried the same things you're trying to manage your pain. Topical ointments, pain relievers, fish oil, but nothing worked. Then I tried Omega XL. And here's why. The underlying cause of painful, achy joints and muscles is inflammation. The key is to knock down inflammation before it causes permanent damage. Backed by 35 years of research, that's exactly what Omega XL does. Nothing comes close to doing what Omega XL does. There's nothing like it. If you're suffering with painful, achy joints and muscles, stop wasting money and switch to Omega XL. Order Omega XL now and get a second bottle free. Visit OmegaXL.com/Rudy. That's OmegaXL.com/Rudy, or call 1-800-844-4888. 800-844-4888.
Thank you for returning, and we will continue with our description of these crimes at the highest levels of our government. Let's go to Russia, because I'm going to show you that these people are serial offenders. This is not a single one act of bribery. It's gone on for, as Hunter Biden says, for 30 years. I'm just going to give you the big ones. I mean, there are a lot of little ones going back to when he was a senator. So then we have Russia. Russia, the country that Hillary Clinton came up with the false allegation that Donald Trump was colluding with Russia, which turns out to be totally false, except the FBI hid the document for 4 years. Why? That's worth its own investigation, isn't it? So this one is pretty straightforward, although I understand it's much more complicated than what the emails show so far. $3.5 million is wire transferred from Elena Baturina, who's the richest woman in Russia, the widow of Mayor Yuri Lushenko, who I knew because he overlapped with me when I was mayor of New York, and was considered to be, the two of them were considered to be the biggest thieves in Russia. Lushkov was such a big thief that Putin had to get rid of him. Because he was shaking everybody down, including Putin's friends. She helped Putin get rid of him and became very close to Putin. So let's translate that into this. $3.5 million is wire transferred from Elena Buturina, the wife of the former mayor, or widow of the former mayor, to Hunter Biden's company. Think about that. Trump is investigated for 4 years and $40 million on a false allegation of collusion with the Russians. And these guys got $3.5 million from a friend of Putin, and nobody's investigating it. That's something really wrong with our country, isn't it? It has to be fixed, doesn't it? Biden's not going to fix it. He can make it worse. You got to vote for Trump to fix this, just to fix this, so this doesn't happen ever again. Well, they get $3.5 million. She gives only one explanation of it. She said she had a financial relationship with the Bidens, with an S. She had a financial relationship with the Bidens. She sent altogether 11 wire transfers after that. So it's the 4 million plus, I'm going to say another 400,000 in 11 different wire transfers. And it's sent directly to the company known as Rosemont Seneca Thornton, and then sent to a company called BAC, B-A-C-K, USA. So Rosemont Seneca Thornton is the partnership involving Hunter Biden, son of the then vice president, Chris Hines, stepson of the then Secretary of State, and the Thornton is the nephew of Whitey Bulger, one of the biggest and most dangerous organized criminals in the United States. What's he doing there? These are the people the Bidens hang around with, because this is what they are. They're a crime family. That's what they are. Right under the definition of RICO. They're involved in the business of crime. They monetize Joe Biden's office to make millions for themselves. That's a matter of fact, not opinion. This is one that proves it. Then the money was transferred from Rosemont Seneca Thornton to a company called BAC USA, which was located in Buffalo, New York. They were a startup company. They theoretically were going to produce tablet computers, and they had a group of unidentified Chinese communist partners. So we have a Russian, most corrupt woman in Russia, friend of Putin, giving him about $4 million for a business that he's in with a bunch of Chinese communists. And then the records of the U.S. Treasury Department show numerous other activities like that, similar to this, in Ukraine, Russia, Kazakhstan, and China. That's the report from the Johnson Committee, and I've seen some, but not all of those documents. I've also seen documents suggesting that there was a much bigger, looks to me like a money laundering operation going on here, but I haven't been able to have the time to check that out, so I can't give you the details. Just to warn you that I think over the course of the next week or two, somebody else will. And I'll give you the amount to key in on. It's about an $800 million money laundering transaction involving the Bidens, Whitey Bulger's nephew, and certainly the Russians possibly the Chinese. But that somebody else is investigating that, and that is only vaguely referenced here in the hard drive, or it may be referenced here in the half of the hard drive that I haven't gotten to see. The next transaction we're going to emphasize, because it's been kind of laid out already, is one that took place when Biden was vice president. All of these have taken place while Biden was vice president as well, which makes them, well, the first two, clear bribes. The third one makes the statement, I didn't know my son's dealings in foreign countries, a palpable lie, actually an insult to everybody's intelligence, even before we had the emails to prove it. Because he flew his son Hunter to China. He went to China as a point man. Remember, every time you hear point man, two things happen. America loses to Biden's make millions. So he goes to China as a point man, like he did to Ukraine, and he's supposed to get China out of the islands they had just militarized, that they dispute with Japan, and also to have them lower some tariffs that had become really oppressively high. He goes there for negotiations with the Chinese government, and Hunter is on that plane for the undisclosed negotiation to get money for his totally useless, decrepit, silly private equity fund, which he owns with Heinz stepson and Bulger's nephew, Whitey Bulger's nephew. Nobody would put money in this. No one. And Joe fails, as usual. He's got about 100% record on that, failure in foreign policy. The Chinese expand their military occupation of the islands. The Chinese raise the tariffs just to stick it to Joe and show what disrespect they have for Obama. Remember, they required Obama to come out of the back of the plane, which that guy did. Came out of the back of the plane, like the American president, just trying to show him who's the boss. So Joe comes home empty-handed. But Hunter, wow. Hunter comes back, and within 8 to 10 days, he gets a letter from the Chinese bank, the Bank of China, owned by the Chinese government, by the way. They're going to be partners in his completely useless, silly private equity fund. They're going to be partners. The Bank of China with him. And they make a commitment, opening commitment of $1 billion. I mean, Goldman Sachs doesn't get that. So this private equity fund with a guy who's been a failure in business, Hunter Biden, with a guy who's been kicked out of the military for being a drug addict, a guy who tragically and unfortunately has a history of being a persistent drug addict, in and out of therapy. Part of the photographs are 50 to 60 pictures of him smoking crack. He's not just an addict, he's a very serious addict whose father made this addiction much, much worse, which we'll explain in a minute.
Never forget what the FBI gave as code names for their two big investigations in the Obama-Biden administration. For the Clinton email investigation, it was called the mid-year exam, almost like they had to kind of trudge through it, plow through it and get it over with. We know what we're going to do. But then, of course, for the Trump-Russia investigation, where they spied on President Trump's campaign, it was called Crossfire Hurricane. I mean, you can almost see Peter Strzok pounding his chest as he's texting Lisa Page saying, "Don't worry, Lisa, we'll stop Trump." So that's where this stuff started. And then we know what they did. They weren't able to stop Trump. They weren't able to stop President Trump from getting elected because 63 million of us voted for him. But once he wins, they said, "Oh no, we got to try to stop him now." Ruin it, go after his administration, and we have to make sure we protect ourselves, cover up what we did, and that's when they go after Michael Flynn.
Well, how do you expect this to shake out? Because Senate Homeland Security is looking to subpoena James Comey, John Brennan, James Clapper, Andrew McCabe, Peter Strzok, also Obama officials Susan Rice, Samantha Power, and Dennis McDonough. Do you think they're going to come in and do you think they will testify?
Well, I certainly hope so. And I want to pick out one name in particular, Susan Rice. Remember that famous January 5th meeting, 2017, 2 weeks before Inauguration Day, that meeting where in the Oval Office, Obama, Biden, Susan Rice, James Comey, Sally Yates, all in that meeting plotting how they're going to go after Michael Flynn, because that was the key to their cover-up. If Michael Flynn, former head of Defense Intelligence, gets to serve as National Security Advisor to President Trump, he will figure out what they did. So first step for them was, we weren't able able to stop President Trump. The American people wanted him as president. What we have to do now is get rid of Michael Flynn. That meeting is where they plot how they're going to do it just a few weeks later when they go set up Michael Flynn on 4 days after he's been in the administration. So I want to see Susan Rice. I hope that she is someone that Senator Johnson is subpoenaed, and I hope she comes in to testify. She needs to answer a lot of questions, particularly because a few weeks later, remember, on Inauguration Day, Susan Rice does the now famous cover your backside email to herself where she says Obama did everything by the book. So Susan Rice, I think, is particularly interesting, and I look forward to the day that she's actually brought in and testifies in front of Senator Johnson's committee.
Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephanie Cox. Here are today's top stories. The Senate committee holds the first federal hearing on election fraud today. Anomalies in Nevada come under the spotlight. An election integrity watchdog accuses Facebook's CEO of influencing the election through hundreds of millions of dollars in donations. Trump attorney Jenna Ellis wants Colorado to investigate Dominion, urging lawmakers at the state's election integrity hearing. A fraud analyst looks at counties using Dominion voting systems. His findings allege a significant vote shift from Republican to Democrat compared to past elections. And President Trump criticizes Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell for congratulating Joe Biden as president-elect. Backlash also comes from Trump allies accusing McConnell of having ties to the Chinese Communist Party. Alleged voter fraud in Nevada stands out among the debates at the Senate Homeland Security Committee's first hearing on election irregularities. NTD's Juliette Song has more details.
In a Senate hearing this Tuesday, a Trump campaign lawyer says there needs to be a verifiable system to make sure the reported election results come from actual voters.
Because that is where democracy breaks down. That is really the fear that we have of losing democracy, is when it's not the people's votes that are being counted, but fraud that's being counted. And we can't just pretend that the emperor has any clothes if he doesn't. We can't pretend that we have a clean election when there's evidence to the contrary. And the way that we get that is through transparency. And we were denied that in Nevada at every single turn.
Binnell said they found at least 130,000 cases of voter fraud in Nevada. This by checking voter information with publicly available records.
Over 42,000 people voted more than once.
And it's not just duplicate voting.
At least 1,500 dead people are recorded as voting, as shown by comparing the list of male voters with the Social Security death records. More than 19,000 people voted even though they didn't live in Nevada.
He added this does not include military voters or students.
About 8,000 people voted from non-existent addresses. Over 15,000 votes were cast from commercial or vacant addresses.
In addition, Binnell said almost 4,000 non-citizens also voted, but the discovery doesn't stop there. He said 2 whistleblowers from Clark County came forward.
They discovered that the number of votes recorded by voting machines and stored on USB drives would change between the time the polls were closed at night and when they were reopened the next morning. In other words, votes were literally appearing and disappearing in the dead of night.
Binnell said his team brought experts to Nevada, trying to understand the code of the machines and what happened. But they were not allowed to run a forensic audit of the voting machines, partly because coding is proprietary information.
That's what we were denied in Nevada, is any attempt to actually find out what happened.
Also at the hearing, a senator for Nevada rejected Binnell's claims.
Both our Republican Secretary of State and our Democratic Attorney General have stated there is no evidence of widespread voter fraud.
She said Nevada's highest court said the same, and she would not, quote, give this false narrative about my state any more attention than it is already unfortunately received. Juliet Song, NTD News.
At the Senate hearing, Trump's team raises allegations of hundreds of thousands of illegal ballots in Wisconsin. And a Pennsylvania state representative shows how some numbers in that state, too, just don't add up. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has the story.
The margin between Trump and Biden in Wisconsin is around 20,000 votes. But Trump's lead attorney in the state says his team has evidence that around 200,000 votes were illegally counted. Some came from voters who claimed they were unable to go to the polls, saying they were indefinitely confined.
Among those claiming this status is one of the electors for Joe Biden. Who said, I can't get to the polls. We have poll workers who claimed it. We have people who went to protests, people who had weddings, people who had vacations, all claimed this status. I can't get to the polls. So they were able to vote without identification. There were 28,395 people we explicitly identified.
And he says under Wisconsin law, voting in advance is not legal. But in one city, they were accepting ballots at least 5 weeks in advance.
What did the city of Madison do? They created a system where people could arrive at a park, hand in their ballots in envelopes 5 weeks before the election. They also created boxes, no controls at all, just boxes on corners that you could throw the ballot in. No attempt at all. And our statutes explicitly say there are only 2 ways to submit an absentee ballot: in person or delivery to the clerk's office. That's it. Nothing else is allowed.
They identified 17,000 ballots that were illegally cast this way. And he says there's likely more since the elections officials mixed all the ballots together afterwards, making it hard to detect which ballots were cast in advance. Sherpa says there are other categories in which as many as 170,000 other ballots were submitted without any application at all. As for Pennsylvania, one state representative explained a discrepancy in the data.
Additionally, on a data file on November 4th, 2020, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania's Open Data Record site reported 3.1 million ballots sent out. In a prior discussion that was had the day before the election, it was indicated that there were 2.7 million that were sent out. And efforts to attempt to reconcile those numbers have not yet been successful and still need to be resolved upon.
And he says between November 15th and 16th, there were around 75,000 more votes added to the data set without any explanation. Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
President Trump fires back after Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell congratulates Joe Biden as president-elect. And as some GOP politicians stay silent over allegations of election fraud, others are taking a stand.
President Donald Trump shared an article on Twitter titled, "Trump's Allies Slam Mitch McConnell for Congratulating Biden," and wrote, "Mitch, 75 million votes, a record for a sitting president by a lot. Too soon to give up. Republican Party must finally learn to fight. People are angry." This comes after the Republican Senate Majority Leader acknowledged Joe Biden as president-elect and congratulated him.
The Electoral College has spoken. So today I want to congratulate President-elect Joe Biden.
But McConnell swiftly met with backlash. General Michael Flynn responded to his comments in a tweet to President Trump, saying that millions of patriots stand behind him. He said, "We won't fail or cower like some in the Republican Party have shown." And attorney Lynn Wood retweeted the video of McConnell's remarks and said, "Mitch McConnell is not a patriot. Ask his wife. She knows." Wood also called McConnell a traitor and alleged that he just wants power, influence, and money. Information about McConnell's wife's connections to the Chinese Communist Party began to go viral on Twitter. His wife is Elaine Chao, whose parents originate from mainland China. She is also the U.S. Transportation Secretary. A 2019 New York Times article about Chao's family resurfaced. The article says that the Chao family's connections to the CCP go back decades and notes her father's university friendship and longtime ties with former Communist Party leader Jiang Zemin. Jiang Zemin is known for his support of the Tiananmen Square massacre and launching the violent persecution against the spiritual practice Falun Gong. The Chow family continues to do business in China that has close ties to the Chinese Communist Party. Wood has made many claims about the CCP's involvement in the U.S. election and accused a number of Republican politicians of being compromised.
I challenged Governor Kemp to step up in front of the people, put his hand on this Bible, and tell us that he did not take money from China. He did. So did Brian Raffensperger.
And while some Republicans aren't acknowledging election fraud, others are taking a stand. On Tuesday, Stop the Steal director Ali Alexander responded to McConnell's statement during a press conference.
My comments are simple. Majority Leader, the constitutional process has not been exhausted. We have January 6th. In fact, you play a role in that. And we know that there's going to be a debate of the two chambers.
Alexander said 8 Republican representatives will be filing an objection during the January 6 joint session. He said Stop the Steal is asking for at least one senator to join them. If any senator objects, both chambers will have to take a roll call vote on the election. Grace Coulter, NTD News, New York.
The Amistad Project is accusing Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg of influencing the election with his money. They're asking whether it's right to inject private money into public U.S. elections. NTD's Miguel Moreno has that story.
An election integrity watchdog, the Amistad Project, is accusing Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg of influencing the 2020 election through donations.
This report and the evidence we're going to share today demonstrates that Mr. Zuckerberg's funds flowing through charities paid for the election judges, paid for the satellite offices to turn out the vote, paid for the machines, and dictated the policies that undermine state law.
A key nonprofit that Klein, a former Kansas Attorney General, referred to is the Center for Tech and Civic Life. According to CTCL's press release, Zuckerberg and his wife have donated at least $250 million and committed to a total of $400 million as of October for election-related initiatives. CTCL, it says on their website, paid for recruiting and training poll workers, renting out polling places, and equipment to process ballots and applications, to name a few. Klein says this organization has agreements to implement a voting plan in cities that ask for financial help, like Wisconsin's Kenosha, Green Bay, and Milwaukee. In other words, an organization funded by Zuckerberg, who's largely made donations to Democrats based on open secrets data, has a part in planning elections.
One of the basic questions, it's a basic civics question I think we should ask here, and that is it legitimate to allocate private money for public elections?
We contacted Facebook and the CTCL for comment, but they didn't get back to us before airtime. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
In an interview with American thought leaders, General Michael Flynn gives his harrowing account of the last 4 years. NTD's Miguel Moreno brings us more from Flynn, who says the American people saved him after he was targeted by the federal government.
Retired General Michael Flynn was caught in the middle of a political saga, a saga that ended with a pardon by President Trump. Flynn said in an interview with American thought leaders that he was the target of corruption in the executive branch.
The American people have been buddy breathing with me for 4 years. Okay? Another way to describe it was the deep state buried me 6 feet under the ground, wanted me to die, and somehow somebody stuck a straw up through that, or a straw was allowed to be stuck up to the air, and I laid down there for 4 years, breathing through that straw.
Flynn was questioned by the FBI about calls he had with a former Russian ambassador to the U.S. Flynn later pled guilty to lying to the Bureau, but he eventually withdrew his plea, and the Department of Justice under the Trump administration found that the FBI had no good reason to question him about his calls. It was soon revealed that the FBI discussed getting him to lie to either prosecute him or get him fired. Flynn says he believes he was targeted for his views. For instance, he made waves when he testified at a congressional hearing about then-President Obama's Iran nuclear deal.
Well, if you go back and look at my testimony, just look at the opening statement. And so there's sort of like when they put Mike Flynn up on the chalkboard and they start writing down all the things that they don't like about him. You know, that's probably check number 1, because that was the single foreign policy initiative disastrous initiative that the Obama administration took on with the #1 state sponsor of terrorism.
Flynn says he's returned to the surface after years of buddy breathing, and now he says he's a good swimmer. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
President Trump's lawyer, Jenna Ellis, is urging Colorado lawmakers to audit Dominion voting machines and mail-in ballots. She says she suspects the Dominion system impacted Colorado's results.
The Colorado Legislative Audit Committee held a hearing on election integrity at the state capitol on Tuesday. President Trump's top legal advisor, Jenna Ellis, called in during the hearing.
The reason that Mayor Giuliani and I went to the 4 state legislatures that we did was to encourage them to take a very serious look at all of the rule violations and the law violations that happened in these states and to take action.
Ellis urges Colorado state lawmakers to look specifically into Dominion voting systems and the state's mail-in voting system.
In Colorado specifically, I would encourage this committee to look at not only the administration of the elections in our state, but also to take a look specifically at why the Dominion voting systems is part of our elections there in Colorado, as well as the mail-in voting system that we've had in Colorado for almost a decade.
The lawyer questions Colorado's decision to employ the controversial Dominion voting system. She highlights that in Jefferson County there are much wider win margins for Democrats after the voting system is adopted.
Jefferson County implemented Dominion before the 2018 general election. That year, Democrats received at least 10% boost in their win percentages. And before 2018, Jefferson County specifically was competitive, center-right and drifting to center-left. Since 2018, no Republican has won a contested state or county office, all losing by double digits.
Denver, Colorado is home to Dominion's American headquarters. 28 states used the voting system in this year's election. Jenna Ellis also has close ties to the state of Colorado. She served as a deputy district attorney there.
A fraud analyst has found a curious phenomenon he calls the Dominion effect. It's a 3% shift in votes from Republican to Democrat in counties that use Dominion machines. The likelihood of this being by chance is about 1 in 1,000. NTD's Kevin Hogan has more on these findings.
And they also don't change the Dominion effect.
Ben Turner is a former actuary who made a living developing fraud detection algorithms. He compared the presidential election results in about 3,000 counties from 2008's election to 2020's. He found that the use of Dominion voting systems is associated with a 1.55% decrease in the Republican vote and the same amount of increase in the Democrat vote.
There are some significant people in our society, Sidney Powell, Lynn Wood, who are saying there's something wrong going on there. I can test the theory by simply doing what I've done in what I put online, and that seems to say that they are onto something.
Turner calls the 2 to 3 percentage point switch the Dominion effect. He says if there is actually such a phenomenon, it could have affected this close election. Turner's analysis shows the margins in Georgia and Arizona are close enough for the vote switching to have flipped the state. He says if the Dominion effect is real, it would not be hard to believe the effect would be greater in swing states. It could have swung Wisconsin and Nevada into Biden's column, putting the Electoral College in his favor. Turner calls for Republicans to be allowed to audit the machines in 4 states.
We need to audit these machines. We need to do some sort of forensic audit. We need to do it now. We need to do it in a transparent way that reasonable people will say, okay, you did audit the machines.
About 650 more counties used Dominion voting systems in 2020 than in 2008. The Democrat candidate got about 2.5% more votes in those counties this election, which Turner says is statistically significant. He controlled for factors like county population and various demographics.
The Dominion effect appears to be independent of these various demographic variables that we have attempted to control for.
Turner says his findings aren't enough to win a court case on their own, but he says if this was a suspected insurance fraud case, the results would warrant a probe. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
And a banker in Switzerland says his own country could have ties to possible underhanded dealings in the U.S. election. The man worked as a poll observer in his home country for over the past 30 years. Our France correspondent David Vives spoke with him.
A Swiss banker who has scrutinized elections in Switzerland for over 30 years says there's evidence of fraud in the U.S. election. Swiss elections typically have some of the highest voter turnout in the world. Until last year, they used electronic systems for voting. This poll watcher claims that his country's unique voting system makes voter fraud common. Some cybersecurity experts and others have also raised concerns. The banker says what he saw in this year's U.S. elections looks similar to what he's seen for over 30 years in Switzerland.
I can say with certainty that the Dominion software is full of backdoors on different levels, and it allows several ways to carry out fraud. And I'll even say that this software has been made to make the work of fraudsters easier.
Attorney Sidney Powell says U.S. ballots were counted in Germany and Spain. She spoke at the Republican Party headquarters in Washington, D.C. Texas Representative Louis Gohmert claimed in November that the U.S. military may have seized servers in Germany from a voting software company named Cyto. He referenced a German source. The congressman says the servers would have information about how many votes were tampered with in the general election. Retired Air Force General Thomas McInerney also claimed in an interview with WVW-TV that the U.S. military seized servers in Frankfurt. NTD has not independently verified the raid, but they claim that Cyto had a role in election fraud may have grounds for further investigation. Powell has declared that Cyto has links to Dominion, an allegation Cyto denies. Cyto provides electronic voting systems. It's based in Spain. In 2019, Switzerland's National Postal Service asked hackers to test the safety of Cyto's software.
Some hackers did reveal in the open how easy it was to carry out fraud with this system. In Switzerland, a journalist revealed how he hacked the software.
Authorities then convicted the journalist on a criminal charge of election fraud. Officials also decided not to use electronic voting in Switzerland. Despite this, the Swiss Post did purchase Cyto software in May 2020, just 6 months before the U.S. election. A move Sippendahl calls inexplicable as the Swiss Post is not permitted to use it. He claims election fraud is possible with involvement from foreign countries.
Some international organizations in Switzerland have a protection level that is higher than diplomatic protection. No police can go there or search those places.
He says all these anomalies are prompting him to investigate further, while Powell and others also continue their investigation and legal cases calling for election integrity. Reporting by David Vivez, NTD News.
The limits of debate in this country are established before the debate even begins, and everyone else is marginalized. They're made to seem either to be communists or some sort of disloyal person. A kook, there's a word, and now it's conspiracy. Say they've made that something that should not be even entertained for a minute, that powerful people might get together and have a plan. Doesn't happen. You're a kook. You're a conspiracy buff.
What is at stake is more than one small country. It is a big idea, a new world order. Out of these troubled times, our fifth objective, a new world order, can emerge.
В своем движении в другом направлении, к новому мировому порядку,
I think
новой
even
цивилизации.
even that does not describe why the world has changed so much and why the world has turned so much toward a new world order and a new kind of civilization.
After 1989, President Bush said, and it's a phrase that I often use myself, that we needed a new world order, and instead it looks like we got a lot of disorder.
There is a chance for the President of the United States to use this disaster to carry out what his father, a phrase his father used, I think, only once, and hasn't been used since, and that is a new world order.
This was a stirring address, in my view, shorter than his father's speech when he announced the New World Order.
And it's only now that we can begin to understand that the world order that globalization brings and what it's going to look like, it's driven forward now not just by the balance of military strength, the Cold War times, or ordinary political power. It's being driven forward by a seismic shift in economic power that we see around us.
We've got to give them a stake in creating the kind of world order that I think all of us would like to see.
Thousands of people gathered to hear Barack Obama deliver key foreign policy speech on his current European tour. The Democratic presidential hopeful laid out his vision for America's place in a new world order, saying he was speaking as a proud citizen of the United States and a fellow citizen of the world.
This film is unique in that it systematically studies the origins, activities, and destiny of evil. Presentations in this genre make all kinds of predictions about the future, most of which will turn out to be wrong. Instead of dwelling on the future, I'm going to survey the past. The New World Order is like a rope. That rope is made up of cords of political, military, economic, scientific, cultural, and religious power. Each cord of the New World Order rope is composed of people at the outer layers who have no idea what the ultimate goal of those at the center of each cord is. As people work their way to the center of each cord, the ultimate goal of those associated with the New World Order becomes clear. A one-world government, a one-world economy, a one-world military, a one-world society, and a one-world religion, all enforced with absolute control under a single world ruler. This goal is not democratic. In fact, most people will not want this goal to be pursued because it limits their freedom. In spite of popular resistance, this goal is being achieved through secrecy and progressive conditioning to make the public want this goal. There is plenty of evidence that this goal exists.
Pat Robertson has written in a book a few years ago that we should have a world government, but only when the Messiah arrives. He wrote, literally, any attempt to achieve world order before that time must be the work of the devil. Well, join me. I'm glad to sit here at the right hand of Satan.
The primary driver of the New World Order is religion. After all, people act on what they believe. Financial control is a means by which the New World Order funds its primary tool, which is warfare. We must first understand the tool of warfare before we can grasp the matrix of control being applied to us. Once we understand these systems of control, we can then understand the belief systems of those who are controlling us. All this knowledge is necessary to form strategies of resistance to what you are probably not even aware of. But how did this mindset, control system, and tool of warfare get created? All secret societies trace their origins back to the ancient mystery religions practiced in Sumeria, Egypt, and Babylon. These ancient mystery religions were responsible for keeping a closed population in total subservience to a small elite, which were worshipped as gods, or as intermediaries between the masses and the gods. Knowledge is power. If you know when the next solar eclipse is going to occur, and others around you don't, you can demand a lot from a primitive society when you threaten to darken the sun. People with secret knowledge of astronomy are going to try to keep that knowledge to themselves. The moment they share that knowledge, their power over any society is eliminated. Large groups of people can be held in check by belief systems given to them by a tiny elite which keeps a core of knowledge to itself. This is why the most powerful groups in any society operate in secret. In fact, the word occult does not mean evil. It means secret. You are not supposed to know the secrets of the elite. Once you discover and verify these secrets, you'll be shocked at how the elite control you.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. Government at all levels must meet its obligation to provide you with the fullest possible information outside the narrowest limits of national security. And so it is to the printing press, to the recorder of man's deeds, the keeper of his conscience, the courier of his news, that we look for strength and assistance, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. Government at all levels must meet its obligation to provide you with the fullest possible information outside the narrowest limits of national security. And so it is to the printing press, to the recorder of man's deeds, the keeper of his conscience, the courier of his news, that we look for strength and assistance, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. Government at all levels must meet its obligation to provide you with the fullest possible information outside the narrowest limits of national security. And so it is to the printing press, to the recorder of man's deeds, the keeper of his conscience, the courier of his news, that we look for strength and assistance, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.
Until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry. American makers of plowshares could, with time and as required, make swords as well. But we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development. Yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes.
A lot of people are wondering about the future of America. New York is a dominant multicultural city. New York is also home to the United Nations, the premier organization of world government. The United States was allowed to become the world's biggest debtor nation when it became bankrupt in 1933, eventually along with all other nations, because your birth certificate is a bond. You are pledged as collateral on the debt of your nation. You are traded as a human resource on the stock exchanges of the world, especially in New York, the home to the world's largest stock exchange. Perhaps the greatest sign of America's pending destruction is on the back of the US $1 bill. You have been told that the bird on the right is an eagle. That's not what Manly P. Hall viewed it as. He knew that it was a phoenix, the ancient mythological bird of fiery rebirth. The phoenix is used to describe how old systems of power are deliberately destroyed to produce new systems of power. The system of power that is being built now is described on the left side on the back of the US $1 bill.